Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Perspective Shift. Although, as I've been threatening now for weeks, I'm going to change the name of this, and I have what I think the name is going to be. I've reached out to a friend of mine who's brilliant at all things wordness. And I said, help me. And she gave me an idea that I love. So I'm working on it. I'm workshopping some different logos that I'm actually going to ask you to help vote on to see what you like best. And then once we get through this relaunch of The Shift, Surviving and Thriving After Moving from Conservative to Progressive Christianity, what's the subtitle? Then I'm going to change the name of this thing. Perspective Shift will continue to be my weekly newsletter, which you can get at colbymartin.substack.com. But my live show is going to be slightly renamed and rebranded. And I'm excited to tell you about that. But today, what we're going to talk about is what we are grateful for as a result of our shift, having shifted. And then in about 25 to 30 minutes, I'm going to be joined by a special guest, Brit Lively. Brit freaking Lively. I don't know if freaking's her middle name. Maybe I can talk her into it. But Brit Lively, lifestyle blogger. Brit, is that how you describe yourself? Lifestyle blogger? Just nod your head. Yeah, she gives me a thumbs up. All right, then we're gonna go with that. I thought I saw that somewhere. But more than that, I just love the way that Brit thinks and the way that she talks and the way that she talks about her faith journey. And so we connected on the Grams a couple years ago. And when I was going through this idea of relaunching The Shift, I'm like, hey, I want to talk to Brit about her faith shift. So that's gonna happen here in about 30 minutes. And Jesse, why are you bad at names? You mean like you're bad at naming things? Oh, like if I were to ask you to name this? Yes, we're changing the name. I just learned this name. You're fine. You're fine. Perspective Shift is still the name of my newsletter. It just won't be the name of this show. It's better. Perspective Shift is a mouthful. I don't like saying it that many times. All right. Glad you're with us. Let's get to it. Here we go. Brooke, you ordered it today? Well, that's fantastic. Thank you. You get a gold star. If I had gold stars to give, I would give one to you. Brick? I'm sorry. I called you Brick, not intentionally. But hey, everybody, let me know where you're watching from, would you? I see some regulars. So I see Odette, who liked my music choice. Thank you, Odette, down in Puerto Rico. I see Mercy from Minneapolis. James is here. What's up, James? Glad to have you here. Ooh. Logan, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. I have a brother named Logan, but that's not how he spells it. Logan from Scotland. So we've gone international. We've also, Brooke, the aforementioned gold star winning Brooke is from the United Kingdom. So that's pretty fantastic. Starkovich is here. Good to see you, Starkovich. So glad that you're with us. We've got Townsend, Washington in the house. Hello, Susan. So glad you're with us over on the YouTubes. Starkovich from Wichita Falls, Texas. I almost said Kansas. Wichita. Why would I want to say Kansas after Wichita Falls? What is that? Why is that in my head? Phil's representing the ATL. New Zealand. We've got New Zealand. We've got Scotland. We've got UK. We've got Minneapolis. We've got Iowa. Eugene. As in Eugene, Oregon, as in my home state, my old stomping grounds. Hi, Jacqueline. Glad to have you here today. All right, we're going to jump into and then we've got Virginia. Barry coming in at the last minute with the Virginia. And John. Hi, John. Good to have you back. And John likes my shirt. Thank you, John. I believe I got this from Express. That's the end of my story on that one. Okay, so thank you, Starkovich. So there's a Wichita, Kansas. That's why it was in my cabeza. But then Wichita Falls is Texas. Is there any relation? Were they both founded by some General Wichita in the 1800s? Okay. All right. Let's jump into today's newsletter. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. If you don't get my Perspective Shift newsletter, why is that word hard for me today? You can go to this URL scrolling across the bottom, colbymartin.substack.com. Which, fun fact, last week when my buddy Josh Scott was on the program, who also has a Substack, page, that someone in the comment section said, "Oh, I'm glad to know that there's some decent stuff on Substack because I just thought it was where all the I forget how they phrase it, like all the alt-right news people went." And I have seen that be a characteristic of Substack, but it's actually it's a mischaracteristic. I mean, you're going to get people on any platform of all shapes and sizes, but Substack is just a neutral newsletter creation program. So yeah, lots of great writers, lots of great content there. Don't be afraid of Substack. Oh, Jesse, hey. If y'all just keep complimenting my clothes, we're never going to get through this. But go ahead. I'll keep it up. We'll keep putting the comments up there. Okay, let's get into today's article. So here's what we've been doing the last couple of weeks. If you just joined us here for the first time, is my second book. My first book, UnClobber, came out like 5 years ago. Yay. Then my second book, The Shift, which is like a survival guide for those who have left or are leaving a more conservative religious context and moving towards something more progressive. This came out a year ago, kind of right at one of the early heights of the pandemic here in the United States of America. As a result, all my plans for the book launch just got completely squashed. And really, nobody at that time, for very good reason, nobody at that time was interested in a book of this nature. They were ordering books about how to grow your own potatoes and how to survive a zombie apocalypse, not how to survive a faith shift. So as a result, it just sort of happened in the background. But then I knew once it hit that 1 year anniversary mark, which was a couple weeks ago, I wanted to breathe some new life into it and talk about some of my favorite things about the book, and more importantly, engage with you all about your faith shifting experience. That's what we've been doing. And I've had 4 questions that we've been working through. What was the hardest part of your shift? What surprised you the most? And we talked about that last week. That was super fun. Today we're going to talk about what we're grateful for as a result of our shift. And then next week we'll wrap all this up, and we'll talk about what do we love most about our new expression of faith. And then or if you want, is there something you miss about your old life of faith? However you want to describe that. Okay. All right. But today's article is the 4 of the reasons why I'm grateful that I shifted away from conservative Christianity and towards something more progressive. So I'm going to dive into this, and then in a few minutes we'll bring on our guest Brit. So here we go. As always, feel free to comment, ask questions, interact with, engage with anything that I say, and I stop periodically. John says, "Isn't conservative Christianity an oxymoron? A number of conservative practices fall away from Jesus' teachings." I don't think conservative Christianity is any more an oxymoron than progressive Christianity, which is, often said to me that progressive Christianity is an oxymoron. I think both conservative and progressive are 2 ways of talking about a particular posture, and both are necessary for different, in different contexts and in different seasons. Just the way I would say it is this way, is that the posture of progressive is to say we need to move something ahead. We need to make progress because there are areas in which we are not there yet. And there, I get it, is sort of a subjective, oftentimes moving target. But when we can look around at life and say that there are people that are being forgotten, there are those that are being marginalized, there is inequity at many different levels, we can say progress can be made. Let's move in that direction. And then conservative is actually a very valuable posture, because once you have achieved some of that progress, then you want to conserve those gains. And that's where a posture of conservative, of building in safeguards and systems and policies and structures and all these things that help sort of lock in the gains that the movement of progress has acquired. So that's why I would say neither one of those are oxymorons. They both serve a purpose and serve a role. However, when I talk about conservative / evangelical Christianity, I'm talking about a type of Christianity, specifically a type that sort of peaked within the evangelical world of like 1980s, that came out of this narrow Protestant view of Christianity, and that sort of conservative Christianity is is what I had left. And I'm leaving still. Okay, all right, let's jump into the article for today. Here we go. What are you most grateful for as a result of your faith shift? I'm not sure what that is, but it happened. All right, here we go. To be fair, this is how I start. To be fair and to be honest, there was much that I loved about my life in and around the evangelical world. I know that I can come down pretty hard on things like evangelical doctrines and evangelical leaders, but it truly does come from a place of we can do better. Like, you don't have to be like this. You don't have to think like this. You don't have to live like this. But I realize I acknowledge, it would not be an unreasonable conclusion for someone to draw if, after reading some of my work, if they end up assuming that I'm just anti-evangelical up and down the ticket. However, that's not really how I see myself. Okay, maybe some days it is, though. For instance, if I just think about Mark Driscoll, or if I read about the recent Southern Baptist Convention doubling down on the subjugation of women because they freaked out because Saddleback ordained 3 women to be pastors. And Baptists are very anti-women in this way. Or when I learn about this strong correlation between the evangelical community and COVID-19 vaccination hesitancy. In those moments, I can find myself just being like, no, get behind thee, Satan. But in my more open, charitable moments, I look back with some fondness about my years of things like doing Bible studies and leading worship nights and attending baptisms. I sometimes miss the pageantry of the holidays. I miss the big conferences with the fancy music and the brilliant authors. And I can at times miss the camaraderie of networking with fellow pastors in your area. So anyway, as I celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the shift, and I give it a bit of a relaunch, because it came out last year, blah, 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 I've been reflecting on the journey of shifting toward this more progressive expression of Christianity. So today I want to talk about what I'm grateful for when I look back on my shift. It's a long list. It really is. There's many things in my life that I'm grateful for now that I'm more characterized by compassion than I am judgment, more by inclusion than gatekeeping, and more gracious, I hope, than arrogant, I think. But I respect your time, and so I'm just going to name 4. 4 of the things that I am grateful for as a result of my shift. And the first is this. I'm grateful for less fear. The most often repeated command in the Bible is this: be not afraid. And yet, when I contrast my life of faith now, post-shift, with back in the day when I was firmly rooted in conservative evangelical Christianity, it's shocking to me how much less day-to-day fear and anxiety I live with. When you believe that God is kind of like Santa and is always watching you and judging you and moving you back and forth across the spectrum of naughty or nice, or in Christianese, we might say, you're worthy of being blessed by God and having your prayers answered, or you can probably expect some bad things to come your way. That inherently provides reason for fear. These ideas of God are, I think I meant to write psychologically, but it is also physiologically unsettling, both and psychologically and physiologically unsettling to have ideas of God like this. I know that in many Christian circles, it's popular to say the phrase that we should fear the Lord, but I just can't get behind the idea that that means that we should actually be afraid of God. I don't think that's what any of the biblical writers intended with this idea of fearing the Lord, is that we should actually be afraid of God. Don't get me wrong, though. I do find the idea of unconditional love terrifying. Unconditional love makes me feel naked and vulnerable. Ugh, scares me. But that's not quite the same thing as being legit afraid of some cosmic entity that might send humans to burn forever just because they don't pass some arbitrary belief test. So yeah, nowadays when I think about God, I just sort of rest in the fact that I'm loved, that I'm seen, and that I'm accepted just as I am. Those times when I mess up, when I cause harm to others or to myself, totally sucks, and I feel the conviction. And on my best days, I try and set things right. But gone are the days when I add another layer to that, which is, and now God is pissed off at me and probably isn't going to answer my prayers anytime soon. That sort of fear no longer exists in my life, and that feels pretty good. I'm pretty grateful for that. Looks like there's, yes, Mercy says, less fear. So grateful. I'm with you, Merce. Karen, yes. Hi, Karen. Less fear. Yes, 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 yes. So much this. Jesse says, Irma Gerd, preach. Before making my shift and before coming out of the closet, I lived constantly with fear that I was going to disappoint God. Yeah. Of course you did. Of course you did, because you were given a vision of God that was easily disappointable and prone to fits of rage and anger if you didn't behave in a particular puritanical fashion. So anyway, yes. All right. Moving on from fear. Grateful for that. Number 2, I'm grateful for deeper relationships. Now, I should start this section by admitting that relationships are hard for me. Okay? I don't think I'm particularly all that great at friendships. It's not that I don't try, I think. It's just, I don't know, they make me nervous. Like I said a minute ago, unconditional love unsettles me. Earning people's respect or performing in a way that causes you to admire me, these are roles I'm much better suited for. I'm much more comfortable with. But simply accepting that a person might like me for just me, I find that sus, to quote my kids. Nevertheless, even though that part of me hasn't fully gone away, what I have noticed is that the relationships that I built on the other side of my shift have more depth to them and far more potential for genuine human connection. When I was an evangelical, I was so wrapped around the behave like a good boy, Axel. I don't think I was ever a very good hang. I think people just felt judged by me constantly, which is fair because I was judging them constantly. Nowadays, I think I judge people far less. I mean, I judge myself far less. So that's got to bode well for lacking or for judging others less, right? And I think that means that I'm maybe easier to be around, which I think means people feel more comfortable with me and maybe open up more around me. And I think all of that are like the makings for deeper relationships. And I felt it and I feel it now, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for deeper relationships as a direct result of having shifted away from conservative evangelical Christianity. Hi, Kevin. Glad you're here. Kevin's our resident Episcopalian. Kevin adds, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to experience my faith on my own and not solely on family momentum. I've also gotten to know other Christians from different traditions, broadening my worldview, amen, including regarding matters of social and racial justice, not to mention all the fascinating people, believers and non-believers, that I would never have met had I not shifted. Love that, Kevin. Thanks for sharing. Brooke adds, less fear, more alive, and knowing that God's got this. Amen, Brooke. Thanks for sharing. Jules, better late than never. Glad you're here. Glad you're here. Yeah, Mercy, it's safer to be... Oh, Mercy says it's safer to be more authentic and vulnerable. I like that perspective. As an Enneagram 3, I don't understand it. But I hear that it's true for some people. Okay. All right, moving on. Number 3, I am really grateful for more, I hope this makes sense, everybody, more intellectual curiosity, alignment, fulfillment, and depth. Here's what I mean by that. Evangelicals, such as myself back in the day, were really, really smart about the Bible. Actually, to be more clear, we were really, really smart about reading and interpreting the Bible within a very particular framework of our religious tradition, which is only one way of reading and understanding and interpreting the Bible, a fact which was kept from me for most of my young and life and college life. As a result, I embodied not just a smug arrogance about my Bible knowledge, but it had the added side effect of making me think I was just smart overall, period, in general. But I wasn't. I mean, at that age, early 20s, other than geniuses, who is really all that smart, but we all think we were. Just because I knew how to conjugate Greek verbs or date the composition of the Torah did not mean that I knew anything about, well, anything else. Shifting away from the world of evangelicalism has given me permission to get more curious about other subject matters, because when you realize that just studying and teaching the Bible is no longer the most important thing ever, you actually have more space for other interests. Who would have thought? Shifting away from evangelicalism allowed me to see how other branches of knowledge, things like biology and psychology and geology, they have a heck of a lot to teach us. And these insights into truth, it's a good thing. It's good. Shifting gave me more intellectual fulfillment because now I don't have to fight so hard to protect these obscure ideas that I find in the Bible from the scary world of science. I mean, putting your head in the sand of fundamental religion might keep your head safe and warm for a while, but eventually you discover that you're actually like suffocating down there and there's like birds pecking at your feet. Finally, shifting has added immense depth to my intellectual world, as ironically, perhaps, not only do I know now even more about the Bible, but I have a greater appreciation for how it can sit within a larger pantheon of sources of wisdom about what it means to be alive. And I'm so grateful for these years of learning about other disciplines that have enhanced my spiritual life. And finally, the fourth thing that I am grateful for as a result of my shift is this. I'm grateful for the increased presence of love. For the increased presence of love. Oftentimes, back in my evangelical days, loving took a lot of effort. I'm not sure I know how to say that differently. It was like hard work to love myself, to love others, to love God. It's hard. But now, after my shift, there seems to be, I don't know, a bit more grease on the wheels. You know what I mean? And sure, showing proper love, period. And by that, I mean love as described by Bell Hooks in her book, All About Love, which involves 6 key ingredients: care, commitment, knowledge, responsibility, respect, and trust. That is hard work, no doubt about it. Love is hard work, yes. And yet also at the same time, there's something about not being weighed down by conservative theology that makes the work of love a bit lighter, more manageable, even a little more natural. Like, for starters, there's just more focus on love. And where you put your focus is what you aim at, and where you aim is often where you end up. Therefore, out here in progressive Christianity land, where we talk about love ad nauseum, it seems, it should not be a shocker that there actually is, in fact, more love present. Yeah. And then shifting away from evangelicalism actually can remove some of these layers that make loving other people, I think, unnecessarily challenging. Particularly, I'm thinking about how so much of relationship building as an evangelical is motivated by a desire to save their soul. You know what I'm talking about? You actively, you make friends with people so that you can invite them to church and or lead them to a prayer of salvation. I'm not saying that genuine relationships don't or can't emerge out of such dynamics. They do. I'm not dismissing that. But I am saying that oftentimes people can see through these sort of ulterior motives. So when you no longer feel like, holy crap, everyone in the world's eternal salvation is dependent upon believing the right things, and I have to get them to believe it. Like, when you no longer feel that way, then you're just like freed up to love people as they are, where they are, for who they are. And that's pretty rad. And then consider how much of traditional Christianity is tied to a hatred of the self. So much shame. So much shame. We heap it upon ourselves. As the wretched sinners that we are not worthy of God's love, we are taught. We are worthy of damnation, we are told. Why on earth would we consider loving ourselves? Oh, no, that's pride. Flee from that. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket science then to see how moving away from those sorts of ideas would open up all new possibilities for us to learn how to love ourselves. So what I'm saying is, there's a lot more love in my heart these days. And since I'm particularly convinced that God is love, I'd also wager to say there's a lot more God in my life these days too. Further, since I'm also convinced that loving God and loving self and loving others was Jesus' biggest focus in life and the thing that he was most insistent that we do, then ultimately, yeah, I'm really freaking grateful for my shift. The fact that there is more love in my life. All right. So those are the 4 things that I am sort of uniquely grateful for as a result of shifting away from conservative evangelical Christianity. And I've seen some comments coming in here, so I'm going to take a minute and try to catch up. A little bit of cats up here. Yeah, Jules. Yeah, my wife and I both mentioned Enneagram a lot. Yeah, we are big fans of that tool for self awareness and learning and wisdom, and the way it opens up relational connectivity, because your Enneagram type, it's far more than just a personality typing system. It helps us understand sort of why, the basic motivations for why we do what we do. And when you can understand why a person is doing what they do, that unlocks a ton of compassion for and potential for relational connectivity. So anyway, we love the Enneagram. Yes, Phil, I agree. True is true no matter where you find it. Uh-huh. Karen likes my list. Thank you. It's a very good list. Correction, a very good list. Yes, Jules. Jules says, I was such a bitter, angry, resentful person. When I started shifting, I was able to let go of all the anger, resentment, and bitterness. Yeah, I can relate to that. Vince, hey man, you made it to a live show. Good to have you. Your comment's a bit long. So if I put it on screen, it'll take up the whole screen. Give me a second. I'll scan it. I'll see what the question is there. Yes, there are people in my old conservative life who now don't speak to me because of my more liberal views. Vince asks, have I ever had to reach out to these people and reconcile them, but were turned away, ignored, blocked, etc. by them? That's a good question. Nobody comes to mind right now with regards to like people that I've tried to reach out to and reconcile with. I unless they were like really close to me, but when I go back to what I mentioned about deeper relationships that I have now, like especially when I think about my first few church jobs, a lot of my relationships felt, looking back now, they were like a mile wide and an inch deep. Like they just weren't really deep relationships. And part of that is because I was young and didn't know how to do relationships. Part of that is because like I talked about the faith system just doesn't really, I don't think is a great conduit for authentic connection with people. So a lot of those relationships have just sort of run their course, and when they stop talking to me, I stop talking to them. But the other thing I'll say, and I talk about this in, to go back to the shift for a minute, I talk about this in the chapter, this chapter 10, I'm not sure why I said it like that. Yeah, chapter 10, shaking the dust from old relationships. What I do in that chapter is I talk a bit about what to do when your conservative friends and family are like concerned about you, you know. They don't really understand your faith shift, and they think that you're off on the road to damnation. One of the things I've learned from Jesus is that there are some times when we are given permission to shake the dust off our feet and to accept people's rejection of us. So there's a story in the Gospels where Jesus sends out his disciples to go 2 by 2 into the villages to announce the kingdom of God and to invite people to participate in this new thing that they were doing. And Jesus said, if they welcome you, then great, then peace to their house. But if they reject you, then shake the dust off your feet and move on. And I read that today and I'm like, yeah, sometimes people are just going to flat out reject us. They're going to reject who we are. They're going to reject our ideas. And we don't have to just stick around and continue to be a doormat for that rejection. We can demand our dignity and shake the dust off our feet and move on. And to your question, do we ever then turn around and go back and reach out? I think people can. I think it's just it's so dependent on so many factors. Is that a safe and wise move for you to go back into that relationship? And that oftentimes requires the input and the insight of people who know you. This could be therapists, this could be spiritual director, who might say, you know what, that doesn't actually, I would not recommend going back to that person. Yeah, so great questions. What do we got? Yeah, Jesse agrees with me that it was hard to love back then. I totally feel that. The whole hate the sin, love the sinner thing was really hard for me to do and ended up making me judgy and prideful. Judgy and prideful, table for two. I'll meet you there. Phil says, pre-shift, loving was harder, partly because there's only one right way. Yeah. And when you have that sort of energy about you, like, people feel it, man. They feel it. John says, an old friend of mine is evangelical and has this mindset of wanting to save others. Our relationship is frayed because I don't want her to manipulate my life. Yeah, it's just, it makes it uncomfortable, to say the least, to have that sort of pressure on the relationship. James, does anyone else find themselves saying, I'm not that kind of Christian? Yeah. Yeah, once you get into this space of progressive Christianity, you realize that, you realize, that Christianity is not a monolith. We know that. And there is oftentimes that impulse to be like, not all Christians. I have, though, over the years kind of stopped pushing back on that, because I think that the basic baseline critique of people who have their complaints about Christianity, especially here in America, a lot of it is super legitimate. And a lot of times it's like, we just need to suck it up and take it, even though it may not reflect us, even though it may not be true about us, even though it might be as a result of, the 81% of evangelicals who voted for Trump. Like, it might be those sort of people that are giving the rest of us a bad name. But I'm not always convinced that a defensive posture of not all Christians are like that. I'm not always convinced that that accomplishes anything of merit or value. So I think for myself, I think I have more or less stopped trying to convince people that not all Christians are like that, and moved to yeah, you're right. A lot of Christians, I'm totally with you. That is a legitimate critique. All right, it's 2:36. Here in a minute, I'm going to bring on our special guest tonight. If you want to check out the rest of the article in which I shared what some of you have shared with me last week about things that you were most grateful for, some wonderful shares like Tiffany, who said, I'm so grateful that my table got longer, louder, more colorful, and more beautiful because of my shift. It's such an affirming way to live, and I love the way Tiffany talked about her table getting louder and more colorful. So good. And you had other people such as Alex, who said, thanks to my shift, I don't have to ignore that uncomfortable feeling that I used to get when I felt like something was wrong, especially from the pulpit. And Alex talked about how she'd sit hearing these preachers say these things, and like, she would know deep in her gut, this is not good, this is not right. And yet it was in a system that's like, well, no, you just got to sort of suck it up because that's what the Bible says, and deal with it. And Alex is like, oh, I'm so grateful that I can listen to the God in my gut now. Anyway, so I encourage you to check out the rest of that article there at colbymartin.substack.com and sign up for my weekly newsletter called Perspective Shift. Wonderful. Okay, we're going to get rid of the article. And now we're going to move into the second half of our program here. And I'm going to bring on a friend of mine, an old social media friend, and a new in-person friend, even though we live in entirely opposite coasts. So please, would everybody welcome to the show, Brit Lively. Hi, Brit.
Yay! Hello, what's up?
What is up? Oh, that's a good question. I'm just hanging out here with some of my friends online in my garage that we've converted into a studio.
Your friends seem pretty cool, gotta
I
say.
have really good friends.
Yeah,
I have really good friends.
lucky.
And I
Very
only
nice.
know like a few of these people IRL. Like most of them are just sort of, I've been doing this Perspective Shift live show now for like 5 or 6 months, and they just kind of, they actually show up and they come hang out with me Wednesday afternoon. It's super fun.
Wow,
So
look at that.
I
Be
know.
my friends. Jeez, guys.
I'd love, yes. Everybody go be Brit's friend. Follow at Brit Lively on Instagram. There you go.
Fun.
About that, by the way, I saw your Instagram story that you were talking about coming onto this, and you mentioned that your swipe up feature wasn't work, and then you said go to Colby's and swipe up. But sister, don't you have to have like 15,000 followers to swipe up? Ain't nobody swiping up on my page. I got a lot of work to do to get into Brit Lively land.
I don't know. I think it's like, I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I can't swipe up. So I just sent them all to your
I'll get there
page.
one day, maybe as cool as you, Brit. But for the time being,
You're way cooler.
That's not true. Thank you for making time for us here today on Perspective Shift to talk about the shift. I'm like, how many times can I plug this book in a 160-minute show? But Brit, I would love to, before we get going, so I've got 4 questions that I've been throwing at guests, and I'm going to throw it to you in a minute. Would you give our viewers a bit of context around what you have shifted away from? So tell us a bit about kind of what your previous iteration of Brit might have looked like.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in a conservative Christian family. My parents would have said that we were non-denominational, spirit-filled Christians. And with that came a lot of, I guess, bubbles, I was always told, this is what you do, this is how you live, this is how God wants your life to look like. And I followed that.
Yeah.
And as I got older and started to really explore myself, and particularly like my sexuality, which I'm sure I'll talk more about, realizing that my journey wasn't completely as linear as my upbringing would have liked.
Yeah.
I started to shift. I don't even know if it was an intentional shift. I think it just like I was sad, I was scared. You talked about fear. I think sometimes fear can catapult you into change. And for me, I found myself questioning a lot of things that I had been told because they didn't line up with how I felt inside of me. So yeah, I shifted from a very conservative Christian upbringing to a progressive thought process.
Yeah.
Not even that long ago, and it's been quite the journey ever since.
Wow. So for you, do you feel like your sexuality, your orientation, was that one of the early and or primary factors that caused you to kind of inspect this faith that had been given to you with a bit more scrutiny? Like, was that one of the major ones?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. So I actually was married to a man prior to kind of realizing who I really was. I got married at 19 to a guy in my church. 19. And the whole marriage was kind of like orchestrated by the church.
By the church. Oh, sister.
No, for real. No,
Oh,
so literally one of the elders'
No,
wives
I'm
had
afraid
a
of this
dream.
story. I mean, keep telling it, but I'm afraid of it. No, I love it and
Sometimes
I hate it.
I tell people, yeah, same. I say this story and I hear myself saying these words and I'm like, wow, that really happened to me. But one of the elders' wives like had a dream that I married this particular person who I wasn't even interested in, and he wasn't interested in me. I was 19. I was actually 18 at the time of the dream. He was 25, and
he was 25.
God told her that we were
processing
going
all
to get
this
married
in real time.
Yeah, I know.
Wife of an elder approaching a teenage girl and
Oh, no,
telling you.
wait, no one approached me. I was like
Okay.
the last one to find out. So they told the wife told her husband, who told the associate pastor, who told the senior pastor, who told my parents, and then eventually someone told me that I was apparently getting married. So that's kind of how that happened. Got married super young. I had no clue who I was.
Of course.
No clue at all. And all of a sudden, being 19, you're figuring out who you are, but all of a sudden, like, you're just kind of like given this like heavy title of a wife. And that became my identity, someone else's wife, so and so's wife. Like, that was just who I was. And eventually, once I got a little older and really kind of figured out, like, there's more to me than that. And I really started to be honest with myself about who I was, and truly, yeah, like, the answer to your question, like, it was the path of like my sexuality that really made me think, I don't know how I feel about this, because even before I kind of realized that I wasn't necessarily a straight woman, I would hear people talk about homosexuality and same-sex marriage, and especially in the church, like, it's talked about in a very negative way, and it always bothered me. I couldn't understand why, but it always bothered me, and I always felt like I had to go to bat. Like, I always had to go to bat for the LGBTQ plus community.
At that time, it wasn't for you.
Even though that was like taboo.
Yeah.
It wasn't for me.
Yeah.
But I was doing it for something, and
That's
now
right.
I know why.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was yeah. I mean, that was what really catapulted me into my personal shift, and then from that point, I just kind of was able to realize that I felt really different about a lot of things that conservative Christianity teaches you.
And how did that marriage end? What was that like? Was that a part of your sort of coming out process, or was?
No, I mean, it just ended really, it was messy.
Yeah.
It was actually what really made me turn away from the church for a little while, just the way that I wasn't supported. I mean, I wasn't a saint either. Like, I made mistakes, I messed up, and it was just really, really messy. I think I felt like I had to sabotage the marriage because I had been vocalizing that I was unhappy. And I was basically told, well, too bad. Like, you need to figure that out. Like, you need to take that to the Lord in prayer and get yourself right with God, because marriage is a covenant that can't be broken, and too bad. So it was just a messy thing for me to end the marriage the way that I did, but I just felt like I had no choice, and I was desperate to be able to be my true self, and I knew that I couldn't be my true self in that relationship.
Yep.
So it did not end well. I had a lot of friends that I lost. You realize, like, you lose people sometimes when you change your thinking. And when those relationships are rooted in theology and religion. You all think a certain way, you all believe a certain thing, and then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, I don't really know how I feel about that. And people are like, oh, well, we can't be friends anymore. And that's the reality of my situation. Like, it really jaded me to the church for a little while. And that's when I really walked away from the church as a whole for a couple of years.
I feel this simultaneous, like, I'm sorry all that happened, and I'm grateful all that happened, right? I mean, how much of that is like just when we look back at our life, like, oh man, some of the hardest things that we went through, while we wouldn't wish them upon others, we're also simultaneously kind of grateful for it, because it made us who we are today. So anyway, thanks for sharing that, Britt. And
for sure.
I did not know that the early part of your story. People in the comment section.
I know. I got like.
They're like, wait, so arranged marriage in Christianity? How is that a thing? Yeah, I don't know.
No. I didn't say arranged, but
no,
I mean,
you didn't.
Yeah.
We said that. No, you didn't.
I might have.
We said that for you. We were just sort of. That's how we were phrasing it. But yes, to be clear, everybody, Britt did not say it was an arranged marriage. Although, what else would you call it when the?
I mean, it kind of sounds like it. Like, I know.
Britt, we have a message from the Lord for you. Okay.
Yeah.
Guess I'm supposed
I was
to
like,
say
you know
yes.
what? It would have been really nice if he had told me, but that's fine. I'll go with it.
Yeah. All right. Let's. I got a few questions for you. Would you mind sharing with us a bit more about your? Now this is kind of post shift, so we talked a little pre shift. Okay. So let's do this. And I realize there might be some overlap in your answers based on what you've shared with us. By the way, John gives you a potentially a conspired marriage. maybe not so much arranged marriage, but a
Sure.
conspired marriage.
I like that. We'll
That's a
go
good
with that,
phrase.
John. Perfect.
All right. So here's the first question for you, Britt. What was the hardest
Okay.
part of your shift?
Yeah. The hardest part, I think, was my own internal, like myself, my own voice kind of just telling me, no, no, this is wrong. You hear people in conservative Christianity talk about like the free thinkers and the people who challenge certain things that, popular theology says, and you're told like, oh no, those people are crazy, they're scary, they're bad, it's taboo. I think I was afraid of being labeled as like one of those like woo woo, like she's like off the deep end. Um, you talked a little bit about fear in your newsletter. I read it earlier today when you sent it out, and I was like, yeah, that's my answer. Like I was just afraid.
Yeah.
The hardest part was just this internal fear of being just like just told like you're bad. Like if
Yeah.
you think that, like that's
Yeah.
the devil getting in there and like,
Yeah.
making you think that the Bible isn't, clear. And I battled with myself so much because at the time I also didn't really know anyone who also felt the same way. I'm from Connecticut, like you mentioned. Here in Connecticut, like Christians, we call ourselves the frozen chosen
Okay.
because there's a lot of Catholicism. With Christianity, it's a little different. Um, and I didn't have anyone else in my circle who I
Mm.
felt was also questioning things and being like, hey, that doesn't feel right. Like, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, I know I've been told this. It's been ingrained in my head ever since I was little. But I have questions. Like, I felt like I was the only one who was questioning things. And that was scary. It was very
Yeah.
isolating.
Yeah.
So I think that was the hardest part of my shift at first was I questioned myself. I questioned whether or not I trusted myself. I'm like, you have these thoughts. They're valid thoughts, but like, are you way off? And there was just a lot of fear in the beginning of my journey with shifting.
Yeah, that no, thanks for sharing that. The way in which much of the church, and by the church, that's just my shorthand way of saying conservative evangelical Christianity, the way in which so much of the church teaches us to not trust ourselves, teaches
Mm-hmm.
us that our thoughts, that the heart is deceitful above all else. Like you can't really trust the thoughts that come into your mind. And then I would even add to that, then as a woman in a very conservative context, like you are even more so told, like, not only are you, slightly less holy and less good than a man, but like you even have to sort of run all your thoughts through the wisdom of men, right? So men have to be the teachers. Women
Yeah,
can't even be teachers. So
right.
so there's like these layers of this program. Like my youngest son right now is all about coding, and he codes these computer games in ways that just blow my mind. And it just makes me think like the way that the church builds these codes into us at a young age, that makes it really
Mm-hmm.
freaking hard to break free from. Like it's not that, and then it gets confusing because we go through these moments of where we want to shift, we want to question, we want to entertain some of these doubts and these struggles, but immediately we meet this resistance because these codes are so deep within us. We meet these resistance, but
Wow.
then it gets
Yeah.
confusing
Yeah.
because we're like, oh, is that resistance? Is that Satan like trying to tempt me out of this? Or is
Yeah.
that the conviction of the
Right.
Holy Ghost? Like maybe I feel bad because the Holy Spirit's like, Britt, don't go that direction. It's not safe for you. And it just makes it all that much more confusing when in reality, I think most of it is just we're fighting up against these codes that were implanted in us. And of course, that's going to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Hard and scary.
Hard and
Absolutely.
scary. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I knew I was going to be met with opposition because I feel like conservative Christians don't love change. And I feel like the way my thinking was going would have meant that I needed to do a lot of changing. And
Yeah.
I knew it was going to
Yeah.
be something that was met with opposition.
Yeah.
And I wasn't wrong.
All right. Second question.
Yeah.
What has been the most surprising part for you? And again, this you can take this in like a surprising good, surprising bad. Just what didn't you see
Yeah.
coming when you think back on your shift?
So the first thing that comes to mind, it kind of like piggybacks off of the question that I just answered. I thought I was so scared that I was the only person who felt like this. What surprised me was how not alone I was, and how there were so many pioneers, you being one of them, just kind of trailblazing this progressive approach. And when I found this like community, I remember just being like, oh my God, oh my God. I didn't know. I had no idea this was out here.
Yeah.
And I felt so validated, but I also just felt like, okay, I knew it. I knew it. I knew I couldn't have been the only one. There are so many people, even people from, this was extremely validating. I don't know if you remember the book by Josh Harris called I Kissed Dating Goodbye.
Absolutely. You bet.
Oh my gosh,
bet.
that book ruined my life. So
sorry.
No, it's okay. But what the coolest thing is, Josh Harris now, I think his bio on Instagram says like, I used to think I had all the answers, but now I know that I don't. Like, he's completely like recanting the book, and he's just like, this is not the way it is. Like, he posts pictures of himself at Pride.
Wow.
Seeing that was kind of just like, oh my gosh, he was a part of my story in the beginning, because his book, which he wrote when he was 21 years old, which I'm like, I don't know who would listen to anyone at 21, but sorry. Yeah.
Shame on you, publisher. Good
right.
gravy.
Seeing him now, and just the community that he has, the community that you have. There's a blogger, her name's Brenda. Her screen name is like God is Gray.
Yeah, God is
and
Gray.
she talks about yeah, she's amazing. She talks about how, God resides in complete black and white, but we as Christians are here on earth kind of like dealing with the gray. Finding her platform. And then there's this woman, her screen name is Talk Purity to Me, and she kind of debunks the whole like purity culture. Like, finding these people and then being connected with other people was the most surprising part, because I had no idea that everyone existed, that they were all out there. Yeah. And that was a really cool moment for me, because I was like, I knew it. I knew it. I knew I wasn't the only one.
I couldn't be the only one. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Jules says, God is Gray is awesome. That's right.
She's so cool.
Bye, Mercy. Get back to work. I understand. Mercy says, thanks, Brit. You can go back to work, Mercy. Bye. This will be on the YouTubes to rewatch later. Yeah, I love that answer. What has been the most surprising? There's a whole bunch of other people like me, and God bless social media. It drives me nuts, and it causes all sorts of harm, and it messes with elections, and it provides us this gorgeous opportunity to find people. And that's a really, really big deal. Okay, next question, Britt.
Absolutely.
What are you most grateful for as a result of your shift? This is what I wrote about and talked about today. What are you most grateful for?
I think what I'm most grateful for, it's going to sound like a little bit of a selfish answer, but I'm so grateful for the peace that I have found after shifting. I look back now and I'm like, I wrestled with so many things prior to my shift, and I just never truly felt peace with certain things. Having now shifted and being on this side of a progressive approach, it's that peace that passes understanding. Like, there's no other way to describe it. Like, I have so much peace just with who I am as a person, with my relationship with God. I feel like my relationship with the Lord is the most raw, transparent, and real it has ever been. Even when I, back in the day, thought I was doing everything right because I was checking all the boxes, being the good Christian girl. I just feel so much peace now in my relationship with the Lord, and my relationship with other people too, and being able to be my true self, and this is who I am and this is how I feel, and being able to talk candidly about my life and the things that I've done, and just how Tiffany said, there's a place at the table, this big, loud, boisterous table. Like, I love that mindset. And there's a quote that says, I spent so much of my life trying to find a place at a table that Jesus would have flipped. And I'm like, ooh, like,
That's
I
good.
love that. Like,
Yeah.
let's flip the table.
Yeah.
It was like, let's change it up and then all come back to the table after we flipped it
That's right.
as one big, happy, colorful family.
Mm,
And we'll just chill. And I love the idea that I have a place at the table. No matter who I am, no matter what I've done, everyone has a place at the table. And the peace that I have in that
yeah.
is priceless.
So good. I love
Priceless.
that answer.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, for sure.
last week the question that I posed was the one before this. What are you most surprised about? And I was surprised at how many people reflected that they were more surprised that they feel closer to God and Jesus now on the other side of their shift. Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't it's like I should have known that was coming, and yet also it did sort of surprise me because I think we being us sort of who have left the old conservative world, we're just told by that whole world that you are going the opposite direction of God. And so we're told that we will experience less God. And then we're out here and we're like,
Yeah.
wait, what if we actually feel closer to God? Like, anyways,
Yeah.
so I love
Yeah.
that answer.
What if we're onto
What
something?
if we're
Yeah.
onto something?
Absolutely.
I love it. All right, last question here, Brit Lively, and it is this. What do
Yes.
you love about your new expression of faith, and or you can talk about what you miss about your old expression of faith?
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a great question. I think just what comes to mind initially for me, and just I have such a heart for the LGBTQ plus community because I am in it. What I love about my new faith is how it's inclusive. It goes back to that table. Like everyone has a seat at the freaking table. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that. And that was not how I was raised to think. I think switching gears and kind of being in this more progressive thread of thought, like, why wouldn't anyone think this way? It's like more
Yeah,
people go to heaven if you think like this,
that's
like
right.
what, like it's just so inclusive.
Yeah.
And it brings me so much joy when I'm able to share my beliefs online or wherever in my day to day. And people who truly thought that because of who they love or because of what they've done or because of their gender identity or because of their anatomy, they felt so wrong and they
Mm-hmm.
felt so kicked to the curb by the church. And then I can just be like, no, that's not how it is, and bring them to that table. That is just like the most amazing thing that I've seen throughout this whole journey, is just like people feeling like they are not a lost cause, people feeling like they belong somewhere, and people just knowing that no matter who they are, no matter where they've been in life, that there is nothing that can separate you from the love of God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's my favorite part.
So good.
What I miss, I don't think I mean, I thought about this. I'm like, I don't know if I miss anything. I'm grateful for my old faith. I'm
Sure.
grateful for the old
Yep.
frame of thought, because
Yep.
in order to shift, you need to shift away from something.
Totally.
So I'm grateful that I had that upbringing to know like that's not how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love, even like you wrote about it in your newsletter, just like the church, like there's just something about going to church. It's a good feeling. You feel connected. the
Mm-hmm.
the Christmas extravaganzas, and it's just like a really cool way to be brought up. But it wasn't for me anymore.
Yeah.
And being able to shift from that, I'm just super grateful. But maybe there's some like poetic answer out there, but like I don't miss anything.
It's all good.
I don't.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
By the way, your cat jumped in on that
Yeah.
last question, so good to see your cat
Oh
behind you.
gosh, that's Mason. Yeah.
What's
Hi,
up, Mason?
Mason.
Well, hey, Britt, if you want to move out to California, specifically the San Diego part, you can scratch that church itch in a really healthy and fun way at Sojourn Grace
I
Collective.
would love to. Even just to do like a little trip.
Do
like
it.
I need a vacation
Come out.
once this whole COVID thing settles down.
Kate and I
I
will
would
show
love
you a
to.
good
I
time
would
around the
absolutely
city.
love to.
It'll be a blast.
Yeah. Oh, that'd
Britt,
be awesome.
I am inspired by you. I am grateful for you. I believe that the world has more love and light in it because of you and because of your voice and because of you saying yes and showing up to life and showing up to yourself. You then just have become this conduit of light for others, and I'm really proud of you for being
Oh,
true
I'm
to
gonna
who you are.
cry. Jeez.
You're doing really, really
Thank
beautiful
you.
work in the world, and it's an honor to
Thank
have
you,
had you on
Colby.
the show today. So thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you and the work that you're doing, just as an ally, and just the great work that you're doing. I'm very, very honored to have been a part of this little piece of it today. So
Awesome.
thank you.
I love it. Thanks, Britt. All right. We'll
All
see you later.
right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that is Brit Lively. Again, if you don't follow her on Instagram, then go do it at Brit Lively. I think you'll quickly see what I'm talking about when I just talk about this light that just exudes from her and her work, and she's fun, and I really appreciate the fact that she came on. So thank you for joining us today. And if you liked this and you're watching on the Facebooks and you want to like my page, go for it. That's great. You can do that. You also don't have to. And or if you're watching this on the YouTubes and you want to subscribe to my channel, that would be awesome as well. And if you found any of this helpful, useful, good, share it with your people. Subscribe to the my newsletter, that's free. And then tonight, friends, come back, because my wife and I, we do the Kate and Colby show Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific. And tonight, the Reverend Emily Scott is coming to join the show. And Emily, her first book, you can see it on the screen there, For All Who Hunger, came out a year ago today, actually. So speaking of book anniversaries, today is Emily's book anniversary. And Emily started in a church in Brooklyn called St. Lydia's Church, maybe like 8-9 years ago. And the church was founded with the purpose of just making and serving and eating dinner together. And that's it. It's just a dinner church. And they do it in Brooklyn. And her book, it kind of tells the story of the creation of that and how that church has come to be and shaped her. And anyway, she's just super dope. And Kate and I are excited to have her tonight. So that's tonight. And we're giving away some free copies of her book, because that's what we do on the Kate and Colby show. We're like Oprah. We don't give away cars, but we give away books. So that's tonight. Come back for that. And then I will see you next week. If you come on back Wednesday at 2 p.m., put a little alert in your phone. None of those regular sized alerts, people. A little alert in your phone, 2 p.m. Wednesdays, to join me on the Facebooks, to join me on the YouTubes. It was really good to have you. Brooke, yes, I also loved that. Heart Eyes. Jessie, I love her as well. Brooke, thank you for saying that. You're wonderful. Melanie, you were just talking about flying out to San Diego. Do it. Let's wait till the church is open, though. That'd be a bummer to have you come out and then just still have to visit virtually. Yes, Phil, that was great. I agree. Thanks for having Britt on. That's what it's all about. Grace and peace out. All right. Love you guys. Be well. Bye. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Perspective Shift. I'm going to now invite you to do one of three things, or do them all if you're an overachiever. First, why don't you go ahead and subscribe to my free Perspective Shift newsletter. You can do that by going to colbymartin.substack.com. This will ensure that each week the articles that I write arrive safely in your inbox. Second, if you're watching this on YouTube, just go ahead and hit subscribe on my channel. That'd be awesome. And or if you're watching this on Facebook, would you click like on my page? For me, this is a win-win, in that it helps me know that you're out there and that you care. Plus, it helps you know when I'm going live. For all my other work, including books that I've written or sermons that I've preached, head on over to colbymartinonline.com. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll join me live next week.